The banquet hall was packed with Dad's colleagues from Meridian Tech, the semiconductor company where he'd worked for 32 years. Silver and blue balloons spelled out, "Happy Retirement, Tom." And a slideshow cycled through decades of corporate photos. Dad at trade shows, Dad receiving awards, Dad shaking hands with clients. I stood near the dessert table, nursing a glass of wine and trying to stay invisible. These corporate events always made me uncomfortable, probably because I spent most of them fielding questions about when I'd get a real job. "Sarah. There you are." Dad's voice boomed across the room. He was already on his third scotch, cheeks flushed with alcohol and nostalgia. "Come meet some folks." I plastered on a smile and joined the circle of executives and senior engineers clustered around him. "This is my daughter Sarah," Dad announced. "She's the creative one in the family. Still figuring out what she wants to do with her life." He crept up my neck. "Actually, Dad, I run. She does consulting work," he continued, talking over me. "Freelance stuff. Very flexible schedule. Lets her travel, pursue hobbies. I keep telling her she should think about getting something more stable, but you know how young people are these days." The executives nodded politely, already losing interest. In their world of six-figure salaries and stock options, consulting meant unemployed. "What kind of consulting?" one woman asked politely. "Oh, business strategy, operational efficiency," I started. "She helps small companies with their processes," Dad interrupted again. "It's cute. Very entrepreneurial. Maybe you'll get a real job someday, right, honey?" The dismissal in his voice was casual, practiced. He'd been summarizing my career this way for 5 years, since I'd left my corporate position to start my own firm. To him, anything that wasn't a traditional W-2 job with benefits and a cubicle wasn't real work. "Maybe," I said quietly, swallowing my frustration. The circle broke up as people drifted toward the buffet. I escaped to refill my wine, checking my phone to avoid making eye contact with anyone else who might ask about my flexible schedule. 3 emails from clients. 2 from my CEO. 1 from my attorney about the final paperwork. The paperwork that Dad knew nothing about. 6 months ago, Meridian Tech had been acquired by a larger semiconductor conglomerate. The acquisition had been messy. Management shakeups, restructuring, early retirement packages offered to senior employees like Dad. He'd taken the package, happy to escape the chaos with his pension intact. What he didn't know was that the acquiring company was a subsidiary of Tech Ventures Global, a private equity firm that specialized in turning around struggling tech companies. What he really didn't know was that I owned 42% of Tech Ventures Global. My cute consulting business had started small, helping startups optimize their operations, reduce costs, improve efficiency. But I had a gift for seeing patterns others missed, for identifying waste and transforming struggling companies into profitable ones. 5 years ago, I'd consulted for a failing manufacturing company. My recommendations had saved them $8 million in the first year. They'd gone from bankruptcy risk to acquisition target in 18 months. The private equity firm that bought them had been impressed. They'd hired me to consult on other acquisitions. Then they'd offered me a partnership. Then, when the original founders wanted to exit, they'd offered me the chance to buy them out. I'd said yes. Tech Ventures Global now had a portfolio worth $3.2 billion. We specialized in acquiring underperforming tech and manufacturing companies, implementing operational improvements, and either taking them public or selling them at significant profit. Meridian Tech had been on my radar for 2 years. Poor management, outdated processes, brilliant engineering talent being wasted by bureaucratic inefficiency. When the previous owner decided to sell, we'd made our move. Dad had been thrilled about the acquisition. "New ownership means fresh capital," he told me at Sunday dinner. "Could really turn the company around. Though I'm glad I'm retiring. Don't want to deal with the changes." He had no idea his daughter was driving those changes. "Attention everyone." The new CEO of Meridian Tech, James Rivera, stepped up to the microphone. "I'd like to say a few words about Tom Parker." The room quieted. Dad stood a bit straighter, beaming. "Tom has been the backbone of Meridian Tech for over 3 decades, James continued. His dedication, expertise, and leadership have been invaluable. When Tech Ventures Global acquired Meridian, we inherited not just a company, but a legacy built by people like Tom." Applause rippled through the room. Dad nodded, accepting the recognition. "Now, I know transitions can be difficult," James said. New ownership, new leadership, new directions. But I want to assure everyone here that we value Meridian's history and its people. That's why our majority shareholder personally reviewed every aspect of this acquisition, to ensure we honored what makes this company special while positioning it for future success. My phone buzzed. A text from James. Ready? I'd told him to keep my involvement quiet until after Dad's retirement party. No need to overshadow his big day. But James had convinced me that Dad should know, that the whole company should know. I texted back, go ahead. Speaking of our majority shareholder, James continued, she's actually here tonight. In fact, she has a personal connection to Meridian Tech that makes this acquisition particularly meaningful. Dad was looking around, curious now. Several executives were whispering, trying to figure out who James was talking about. Tom, if I could ask you to join me up here? Dad walked to the front, confused but smiling. He loved being in the spotlight. James put a hand on Dad's shoulder. Tom, I need to introduce you to someone. The person who led this acquisition, who personally reviewed Meridian's operations, who designed the restructuring plan that's going to save 200 jobs and triple revenue over the next 3 years. He gestured toward me. Your daughter, Sarah Parker, our majority shareholder and the founder of Tech Ventures Global. The room went completely silent. Dad's smile froze. His face went from flushed to pale in seconds. Sarah, he said, his voice barely audible. What is he talking about? I walked to the front, my heels clicking loudly in the quiet room. James handed me the microphone. Hi everyone. I'm Sarah Parker, founder and majority shareholder of Tech Ventures Global. We acquired Meridian Tech 6 months ago as part of our portfolio strategy to invest in undervalued semiconductor companies with strong engineering talent. I looked at Dad. His mouth was opening and closing, but no sound came out. I've been doing consulting for the past 5 years, I continued. That consulting grew into a private equity firm that now manages a portfolio worth $3.2 billion. We specialize in operational turnarounds, and Meridian Tech is our latest acquisition. Whispers spread through the room. Executives were pulling out phones, probably Googling Tech Ventures Global, pulling up news articles about our acquisitions. The restructuring plan James mentioned includes significant capital investment in R&D, modernization of manufacturing processes, and expansion into emerging markets. We're also implementing efficiency measures that will reduce overhead costs by 30% while increasing production capacity by 50%. I turned back to Dad. The cute consulting you've been dismissing for 5 years? It's been building this. Every small company I helped, every turnaround I managed, every operational improvement I implemented, it was all building toward Tech Ventures Global. Dad finally found his voice. You own the company? 42%. Controlling interest. The other partners own the rest, but I make the final decisions on acquisitions and strategy. But you never said. I tried. Multiple times. But every conversation about my work got interrupted by you explaining that I needed a real job. At Christmas, I tried to tell you about the Tech Ventures acquisition of Dynamic Systems, and you changed the subject to ask when I'd settle down and get benefits. At Easter, I mentioned we were looking at semiconductor companies, and you told me I should apply for positions at Meridian because they had real careers available. The room was watching this play out like a tennis match. James looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. Sarah, I didn't know. You didn't ask, Dad. You assumed that because I wasn't following a traditional corporate path, I must be struggling. You assumed consulting meant I was barely getting by when in reality I've built something bigger than anything you ever worked on. That last part came out harsher than I intended, but I was tired. Tired of being dismissed. Tired of being treated like I was still figuring out my life when I'd actually figured it out years ago. I'm sorry, Dad said quietly. I should have listened. Yes, you should have. James cleared his throat. Tom, your daughter's work is why Meridian Tech still exists. The previous owners were planning to liquidate, sell off the assets, lay off the workforce, shut down operations. Sarah convinced us to acquire instead of liquidate. She saw value that others missed. 200 people still have jobs because of her vision. Dad looked like he'd been punched. I didn't know it was that bad. Because you retired rather than face it, I said. But the engineers who stayed, the ones who couldn't afford to retire, they would have lost everything. My restructuring plan saves their jobs and gives them a future. An older engineer named Richard stepped forward. Sarah, I don't know if you remember me. I worked with your father for 20 years. I remember. Your lead engineer on the microprocessor division. I just want to say thank you. My son is starting college next year. Without this job, I couldn't afford to send him. What you've done here, it's not just business. It's people's lives. Others started nodding. The room's energy shifted from shocked to grateful. That's what my hobby does, I said, looking at Dad. It saves companies. It saves jobs. It builds value. And yes, it makes money, a lot of money. My net worth is approximately $400 million. My firm manages billions. But it's not about the money, Dad. It's about seeing potential that others miss and having the courage to invest in it. Dad sat down heavily in a nearby chair. 400 million. Give or take. Depends on the market. James took the microphone back. I think this is a good moment to transition to dinner. Sarah, would you join us at the head table? I'd planned to slip out after the revelation, but something made me stay. Maybe it was the gratitude on the engineers' faces. Maybe it was the need to see this through with Dad. At dinner, I sat next to James while Dad sat across from us, mostly silent. Other executives peppered me with questions about tech ventures, about the semiconductor industry, about our strategy for Meridian. I answered professionally, slipping into CEO mode. This was comfortable, talking business, discussing strategy, explaining vision. This was who I was, who I'd been for years, while Dad called it a hobby. After dessert, Dad finally spoke. Can we talk? Privately. We found an empty conference room off the main hall. Dad closed the door and leaned against it. I've been a fool, he said. Yes. All this time I thought you were wasting your potential. I thought you'd thrown away your career for some pipe dream. My pipe dream is worth more than everything you've earned in your entire career. Combined. With interest. He flinched. That's fair. That's more than fair. Is it? Because I've spent 5 years listening to you dismiss my work, minimize my achievements, and treat me like I was lost and struggling when I was actually building an empire. Empire, he repeated softly. God, Sarah. You own my company. 42% of the company that acquired your company. And I did it because I saw value. Because I knew the engineering was solid even if the management was terrible. Because I wanted to save those jobs. Did you do it because of me? I thought about that. Partly. I wanted you to finally see what I'd built. But mostly I did it because it was a good investment. Because Meridian Tech is salvageable, and because 200 families depend on it. Dad rubbed his face. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm incredibly proud. I don't need your pride anymore, Dad. I needed it 5 years ago when I was taking a risk and starting my own firm. I needed it 3 years ago when I closed my first major acquisition. I needed it last year when Tech Ventures made the Forbes list. But you were too busy dismissing my hobby to notice any of it. Can I earn it back? Your respect. I don't know. Maybe. But it starts with actually listening when I talk about my work. With taking me seriously. With understanding that success doesn't have to look like a 30-year corporate career to be valid. I understand that now. Do you? Or do you understand it because James Rivera announced it in front of 100 people? Would you have believed me if I'd just told you privately? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I need to get going, I said. I have a board meeting tomorrow morning. One of our portfolio companies is going public and we need to finalize the timing. Sarah, wait. He stood, looking older than his 65 years. I know I've lost your respect, but I'd like a chance to earn it back. To really know who you are now. To understand your world. Then stop talking and start listening, Dad. That's all I've ever wanted. I drove home to my apartment in the city, not the cramped studio Dad imagined, but a 3-bedroom penthouse with skyline views. The place I'd bought 2 years ago when Tech Ventures closed a particularly profitable deal. My phone rang. James Rivera. That was intense, he said. Sorry if I made things awkward. Are you kidding? Half the company is now terrified of disappointing you, and the other half wants to work directly with you. Morale is higher than it's been in years. Turns out people like knowing their CEO's boss actually cares about their jobs. Good. How's your father? Shocked. Embarrassed. Maybe starting to understand. Give him time. Not every day you discover your daughter is a titan of private equity. After we hung up, I made tea and stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city. Somewhere out there were dozens of companies I'd helped turn around, hundreds of jobs I'd saved, billions in value I'd created. All from the hobby my father had dismissed. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "I'm sorry. I'll do better. I promise." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Actions, not promises. "Show me." He texted back immediately. "I will. Starting tomorrow. Can I take you to breakfast? I want to hear about your work. Really hear it." I thought about it. Then, Saturday, 9 a.m. My office. "I'll show you what Tech Ventures actually does." "I'll be there." Saturday morning, Dad arrived at Tech Ventures Global Headquarters at 8:55 a.m. He stared up at the gleaming glass building, at the company name etched in steel above the entrance. I met him in the lobby. "Come on. I'll give you the tour." I showed him everything. The offices, the conference rooms, the walls covered with charts showing our portfolio companies' growth trajectories. I introduced him to my team. My COO, my CFO, my analysts and associates. I walked him through our acquisition process, our due diligence procedures, our turnaround strategies. I showed him what 5 years of my hobby had built. At the end, we sat in my corner office, the one with views of the harbor, and I pulled up Meridian Tech's transformation plan on my computer. "This is what we're doing with your company," I said. "New equipment, modernized processes, expanded markets. In 3 years, Meridian will be worth 5 times what we paid for it." Dad studied the projections in silence. "Finally, you've done something extraordinary, Sarah." "I know. And I almost missed it because I was too stubborn to see past my own assumptions. Yeah. I want to understand this world. Your world. If you'll let me." I leaned back in my chair. "It won't be easy. You'll have to actually listen. Actually learn. Actually accept that I know things you don't. I can do that. Can you? Because it means respecting my expertise. Trusting my judgment. Acknowledging that my way of building a career is just as valid as yours was." "More valid," he said quietly. "You've accomplished more in 5 years than I did in 32. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. Over the next months, Dad became my most attentive student. He attended board meetings as an observer, asked thoughtful questions, learned the language of private equity and operational turnarounds. He even started helping, using his decades of semiconductor experience to consult on technical aspects of our portfolio companies. He never called my work a hobby again. And when Meridian Tech's turnaround succeeded ahead of schedule, revenue tripled, workforce expanded, stock value quintupled, Dad was the first to call. "You did it," he said. "You saved the company." "We did it," I corrected. "You and your colleagues built something worth saving. I just saw what it could become. Still, I'm proud of you, Sarah." This time I believed him.